Inflation, the silent thief. It never knocks, never warns, never apologizes. It doesn't slip a hand into your wallet or steal from your bank account. Instead, it steals from something far more important: what your money can actually buy. You wake up one morning and realize the same salary buys less food, the same savings buy less real estate, and the same currency buys fewer of almost everything. And yet, the number printed on the bills hasn't changed. That is the beauty and cruelty of inflation. The value evaporates while the illusion remains. In the 18th century, when I wrote about markets, money had weight. A gold guinea was a gold guinea. It didn't shrink, didn't dissolve, didn't lose purchasing power because a politician felt generous. But in your world, money is no longer restrained by metal. It is restrained only by trust. And trust, as you've seen, expands and shrinks far more easily. When governments and central banks increase the money supply faster than the economy creates new value, the result is unavoidable. Each unit of currency becomes weaker. In 2020-2021 alone, the United States expanded its money supply, M2, by more than 40%, the fastest increase in modern history. Europe embarked on its own stimulus programs worth trillions. Japan continued its multi-decade experiment of easy money. And when global supply chains collapsed, factories closed, ships stuck outside ports, semiconductor shortages spreading like a virus, prices exploded. You experienced inflation at 9.1% in the US in 2022, the highest in 40 years. The Eurozone reached 10.6%. The UK crossed 11%. The world was shocked, but inflation wasn't the surprise. The surprise was that people expected money printing and supply shocks to cause anything else. Inflation comes from three main sources: too much money, demand pull; too few goods, cost push; and expectations. When oil hit $120 a barrel, everything connected to oil became more expensive. Transportation, food, plastics, electricity. When shipping container prices rose from $1,500 to $20,000 per unit during the pandemic, the cost of imported goods skyrocketed. A refrigerator didn't become more complicated overnight. It just became more expensive to move. Then came the psychological inflation. Companies raising prices simply because customers expected prices to rise. That expectation alone added billions in corporate profits, and economists coined a new term for it: greedflation. But the story gets stranger. Inflation, while painful for citizens, is beneficial for governments. Just look at numbers. The US national debt is over $35 trillion. Japan's debt is over 260% of its GDP. Italy is around 140%. France above 110%, China near 80% and rising. Such mountains of debt become easier to manage when inflation reduces their real value. If inflation is 5% a year, then every $1 trillion of debt effectively loses $50 billion of real weight annually. Governments deny this strategy publicly, but they use it privately. Why raise taxes, an unpopular act, when you can quietly reduce the burden of debt through inflation? For individuals, the impact is immediate. $1 in 1980 has the purchasing power of roughly $3.50 today. $1 in 2000 equals about $1.70 today. $1 in 2020 already lost around 15–20% of its purchasing power by 2024. If you kept $10,000 under your mattress during that period, Congratulations! You now hold $10,000 that behaves like $8,000. Savings accounts do little better. The average US savings account in 2022 paid 0.06% interest, while inflation was 9%. That means savers lost money at a rate 150 times faster than they earned it. Inflation punishes the cautious and rewards the strategic. But borrowing thrives. If you took a mortgage at 3% interest during years when inflation ran between 5% and 8%, your real cost of borrowing dropped below zero. You repaid with money worth less than the money you borrowed. This is why the wealthy borrow heavily. A billionaire with a $50 million loan at 3% interest during a 7% inflation environment is effectively being paid by inflation to borrow. His assets, real estate, stocks, companies, rise with inflation. His debt shrinks. The poor save cash. The wealthy save assets. Inflation widens the gap not because it is unfair, but because some understand how the system works and others was never taught. If you want to see inflation's extremes, look at Weimar Germany. Prices doubling every few days. A loaf of bread costing 200 billion marks. Workers paid twice a day because wages were worthless by evening. Zimbabwe repeated the tragedy in the 2000s, with inflation reaching 500 billion%. Venezuela followed with inflation over 1 million%. These disasters weren't caused simply by printing money, but by the collapse of trust in the currency. Once trust dies, money is just paper. Your world, thankfully, is not there, but it practices a softer version, shrinkflation. The chocolate bar that used to be 200 grams becomes 180 grams, then 150 grams, then 135 grams. Same price, less product. Coca-Cola bottles shrinking. Potato chip bags half filled with air. This is inflation disguised as generosity. And because consumers notice prices more than quantities, companies steal quietly. Yet, despite all the pain inflation causes, the truth is unavoidable. Your system needs inflation. Without it, people stop spending. Companies stop investing. Debt becomes unbearable. Wages stagnate. Economies shrink. Deflation, falling prices, is far deadlier. The US experienced it in the Great Depression. Japan lived in deflation for nearly 20 years and struggled to grow. Mild inflation, 2 to 3%, keeps money moving. It encourages people to act now rather than wait. A world with zero inflation is not stability. It is stagnation. So how does one survive in a world where inflation is permanent? First, by understanding that cash is not wealth. Cash is a melting ice cube. Money must be placed into assets that move with inflation or ahead of it. Stocks that historically return about 7–10% annually. Real estate that tracks inflation and population growth. Index funds, businesses. Commodities when appropriate. Second, by using fixed-rate debt wisely. When inflation rises, your loan becomes cheaper in real terms. Third, by studying pricing behavior. When you see a company raising prices aggressively, ask, is this panic pricing or structural cost? Inflation reveals inefficiencies you can exploit. And fourth, by investing in skills. Skills that allow you to raise your income faster than inflation are the most powerful hedge. Inflation is not just a thief, it is a mirror. It reflects how well you understand value, how fast you adapt, and how deeply you participate in your own financial future. It forces you to distinguish between money that grows and money that sleeps. It punishes passivity but rewards awareness. It destroys wealth for those who cling to it in cash, and creates wealth for those who transform money into something real. Welcome to my channel. Here, we uncover the forces shaping your financial reality. Inflation, debt, markets, confidence, the real mechanics beneath the economy. Because the real challenge is not to stop inflation. The challenge is to position yourself so that inflation works for you instead of against you.